Good afternoon, class. I wanted to come to you and talk to you about the diversity ethics paper. You can read all of the details here, but I want to give you a little bit of an overview about the purpose of this paper. The purpose of this paper is to look at a case study out of the course text and look at it from a human behavior perspective. Okay? By the time you start this paper, you will have read chapters 1 and 2, and you begin to see that people are more than just the way they look or the way they act. There's a lot more to us as humans. And so, as you're exploring these cases, various things from a social work perspective are going to come out. So you may begin to notice that this person's difficulty has to do with some of their issues of diversity. Now, not all of their difficulties are going to have to do with diversity, but most of the time, some of the time, I guess, when people have a difficulty and they bring it to a social worker, that it may have to do with how they're interacting in the world with regard to their race or their social class or their religion or their sexual orientation. And the case studies in the book have several examples of this. You'll have the whole story there, but if you read into the story a little bit, things will begin to stand out to you as issues that may be occurring because of the way this person is affected by their environment or the way that people are treating them in their environment. Okay? So the purpose of this paper is to look at a person and pick out what might cause them a dilemma and what might cause you a dilemma as a social worker. Now, you're not going to be able to do this if you haven't looked at the Code of Ethics. You have to look at the Code of Ethics in order to write this paper, and you have to understand ethical dilemmas. So you need to be sure that you're reading in the course text the information about ethical dilemmas. There are also a couple of videos in course materials about ethics. And so you want to familiarize yourself with ethics and with this person's case before you start this paper, because you're going to combine the two. You're going to take this person's life and you're going to determine, are there any dilemmas that might come up? If I was a social worker working with this person, what might come up? Okay? And if something comes up, is it related to their race, their ethnicity, their mental, physical ability, their sexual orientation? Is it related to any of those things, any of the dilemmas that I have? Or is it related maybe to the relationship that I have with them? But you've got to read the NASW Code of Ethics further than the first paragraph. Look through it, skim it, understand how it's set up before you start this. And then you can start the paper looking at these instructions. And here's what you're going to consider. It says, you will be using the information you found in the articles to support... Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. So you're going to research the areas regarding the client's chosen specific issues of diversity. So you're going to pick a couple of issues to write about that you recognize in this client. Then you're going to have 2 academic articles. Those articles are supposed to support your findings. Okay? So here are the steps. What are the ethical dilemmas that might come up with this client? How will you resolve those dilemmas? What are your solutions for resolving those ethical dilemmas? And what code in the Code of Ethics matches what you're talking about? So let me give you an example. Let's say that I have a client and they have an issue of, let's say they have an issue of confidentiality, okay? For whatever reason, we're talking about them, and we're talking about their sexual orientation, for example. And they want to keep this private, and their family has asked for me to talk about them. Well, that brings up confidentiality for me. I know that because I'm familiar with the code of ethics. You're going to know that too after you familiarize yourself with the code of ethics. So here I have identified an issue of confidentiality. So I'm going to look in the code of ethics. I'm going to see what code matches that. And I'm going to write about that. But I'm also going to write about this person from a diverse perspective. So I might find journal articles on sexual orientation or social class or religion or whatever it is. I'm going to look for journal articles in those areas so that I can support my findings. So I'm going to say, well, the reason I need to support this person in confidentiality is because the professionals say this. The code of ethics says I need to do this. And the articles help support what I'm saying throughout the paper. Now, I don't want to get too specific because so many people will have different ideas. But read these instructions through. Here's how you format the paper. Okay? And then here's how it's graded. There's also information here is your code of ethics. And then there's this ethical principles screen. I want to show you this real quick. Lowenberg and Dolgoff have developed the way that you would decide if something has an ethical dilemma. Okay? So this screen, my screen is too small. Let me make it bigger here. So this screen shows how what you do is you would take the ethical dilemma and you screen it. You line up the ethical principles and you screen the dilemma against the principles. Like that. You identify the dilemma, you identify the possible issues involved, you review the ethical guidelines. You might need to consult with your peers. That might be part of something that you write about. I needed to consult with, this is how I would deal with this. So basically, you're taking the client, you're looking all at their issue, and you're finding out what maybe some ethical dilemmas might be, and then you're going to decide how you're going to deal with them using the code of ethics. So let me say it another way. You're going to use the NASW code of ethics and apply it to a client situation with regard to how you would deal with an ethical dilemma related to that client. Okay, so I'm going to give you the rundown here. Here's a case scenario. The agency has agreed to provide internship experiences to 3 social work interns. You've been told that they have been through the necessary trainings and are ready to get to work. You have intakes with new families scheduled for next week. Your boss informs you that you are to arrange for the interns to observe you during your appointments. You ask her where to get informed consent forms for the process. She says that the policy in the agency is to ask verbally if it's okay for the student intern to observe. Now let's think about this. What is the dilemma there? Another confidentiality dilemma. Because you're thinking the client needs to sign something to say the intern can observe. Let's see. So if we go over, I'm sorry about this, screen is just not quite big enough, but if we go over the ethical priority checklist, we have to look at what our options are. Okay? If I don't sign this piece of paper and I go ahead and meet with the client, is it a threat to someone's life? Is it unjust, unfair, unequal, or violate their human rights? Is it unreasonable, or does it limit someone's self-determination? These are all the questions you would ask when you're making a decision about what to do in an ethical dilemma. You have the dilemma and you think, well, what am I going to do about this? These are the questions you ask. Is it life-threatening? Is it unjust? Is it unfair? Does it cause someone significant personal distress? Does it decrease their quality of life? Does it cause someone to lose their right to privacy and confidentiality? There it is. So there it is. On the ethical priority checklist, this might have an effect on their privacy and confidentiality. Does it involve distorting or withholding the truth from an individual or a community? I just wanted to go over one. Well, let's do another one. One of the parents, I only have about 4 minutes. One of the parents you work with has lost her license to drive after a recent arrest for driving while intoxicated. You see her for a regularly scheduled case management visit. During the session, you come to believe that the client is under the influence of alcohol. The client shares with you her frustration over her need to drive to work and other places as justification for her decision to occasionally drive without her license. So let's look. If we go through the priority checklist, is it a threat to someone's life? Maybe. Unjust, unfair? Violate basic human rights? Is it unreasonable? Does it limit her self-determination? That's an issue then too, right? Cause someone significant personal distress or economic hardship? Does it decrease the quality of her life? This is where it gets scary because it's like, wow, she wants to be able to drive somewhere without a driver's license, and there's several of these ethical priorities that are actually in her favor. But it involves distorting the truth. So you have to weigh out. And I can't give you the answer. That's the thing. That's why you're supposed to explore these things within this paper for a specific client. I'm going to end there so I can wrap this up. So, once you get started on this paper, I think you'll see. But the thing is, you can't really start this paper, and a lot of students want to go ahead and start, right away. But you can't really start this paper until you've read the course text and gotten partially into the topic. So, thank you for your patience in this presentation. I hope that it was helpful and not more confusing. But if you have questions, email me. And good luck.